Joins me tonight, who, in case you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I don't even know what the Windsor framework is anymore, I've lost the will to live by the Northern Ireland Protocol, Ben Habib, he's going to explain it all to us and why it matters. Is it a good thing, though, for the UK or not? And against the judgment of people who know, they're talking about some of the best economic experts in this country, inflation didn't go down today, no, it went up. I can't help but wonder, have we got to the point now where so many businesses are just being greedy, raising their prices way beyond their cost increases? Your thoughts on that? And did you see Rishi Sunak? He's finally, I think it only took him about 150 days, he's finally released his tax details. Should he have had to, though? I don't think so. Do you? We'll get into all of that and more. But before we do so, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top stories tonight on GB News. Well, as you've been hearing, Boris Johnson has told the Privileges Committee, hand on heart, he did not lie to MPs over Partygate. The former Prime Minister says although he takes full responsibility for the gatherings in Downing Street during lockdown, his statements in the House of Commons were made in good faith. He went on to criticise the committee of bias in its investigation and the chair, Harriet Harman, of being prejudicial, suggesting the proceedings were extremely peculiar.
I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about. People who say that that event was a purely social gathering are quite wrong. My purpose there was to thank staff, to motivate them in what had been a very difficult time and what was also a very difficult day in which the Cabinet Secretary had just resigned.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has seen off a backbench revolt by Tory hardliners opposed to his Brexit deal with Northern Ireland. 22 Conservative rebels, including Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, voted against the Stormont break regulations. The key element of the Windsor framework aims to give the Stormont Assembly a greater say on how EU rules apply to the province, namely the Stormont break. The vote was passed with 515 votes to 29, with Labour and other opposition parties backing it. Now, as Michelle was just saying, the Prime Minister has released his long-awaited personal tax returns, showing he paid £432,000 in tax in the 2021-22 financial year. Rishi Sunak published his personal tax documents covering the last 4 years. It follows the commitment he first made during his Tory leadership campaign last summer. Now, the RMT union has suspended strikes due to be held on the 30th of March and the 1st of April. That comes as discussions continue between the union and the rail delivery group in the long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. The Labour leader says crime is out of control and people are paying the price for a government that never takes responsibility. Speaking in the House of Commons, Sir Keir Starmer challenged the Prime Minister, asking if he accepted the findings of Baroness Casey's damning report in full. She found the Metropolitan Police to be institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. But Rishi Sunak says only the Conservatives can be trusted on policing.
What did his shadow policing minister say? Prison doesn't prevent crime. It tells you everything that you need to know about the Labour Party. You can't trust them to keep Britain safe.
Mr. Speaker, he needs to get out of Westminster, get out of Kensington, and I don't mean to Malibu, to the streets of Britain. Go there and tell people it's all fine and see what reaction he gets.
Well, Baroness Casey told MPs today that if the Met can't change, it must be completely reformed.
I feel desperate to ensure that the Metropolitan Police Service and anybody that can hold them to account actually does get them to change. And if they don't change, if the combination of new leadership, the combination of different support, different powers, a new committee, I don't think we should leave it forever. If something can't be changed, if it can't be fixed, then reform it completely.
Well, away from Westminster, Scotland's First Minister has issued an apology to mothers who are forced to give up their children for adoption. In one of her last acts, the Scottish leader Nicola Sturgeon condemned the practice, which is estimated to have forced 60,000 women to part with their children during the 50s, 60s and 70s. Ms Sturgeon addressed MSPs in Holyrood as victims and campaigners watched.
Government and a Parliament, we can set the record straight. We can acknowledge the terrible wrongs that were done, and we can say with one voice that we are sorry. So today, as First Minister, on behalf of the Scottish Government, I say directly to the mothers who had their babies taken away from them, to the sons and the daughters who were separated from their parents, to the fathers who were denied their rights, and to the families who have lived with the legacy. For the decades of pain that you have suffered, I offer today a sincere, heartfelt and unreserved apology. We are sorry. No words can ever make up for what has happened to you, but I hope this apology will bring you some measure of solace. It is the very least that you deserve, and it is long overdue.
Nicola Sturgeon. Now, the Prince of Wales has made a surprise visit to Poland today to thank UK troops involved in the Ukraine war. Prince William praised the cooperation of British and Polish troops who've been working together to support the people of Ukraine and their freedom. He met with the Polish Defence Minister as well as soldiers to personally thank them for working together. 33 people have been injured after a ship toppled over in a dry dock in Edinburgh. A major incident was declared this morning when the vessel, which belongs to the Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, became dislodged and keeled over at an angle of 45 degrees. 21 of those injured have been taken to hospital for further treatment. And lastly, surging food prices unexpectedly pushed inflation up last month, increasing fears of another rise in interest rates. The Office for National Statistics says it's a result of higher prices and growth in restaurants, as well as clothing and food, which hit its rate in more than 45 years. That was partly driven by a shortage of vegetables too. The Bank of England make their next interest rate decision tomorrow. Full coverage right here, GB News. And I'm back in an hour with more news. Back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, two of my favourites, fresh from Doncaster on budget day, so they are. Ben Habib, the CEO of First Property Group, and now a member of the Reform Party. I'll be touching upon that before the end of the programme. And the political commentator, Joe Phillips. We had a right good time, didn't we, in Doncaster?
It was great. It was really fun. It was a
terrific.
lovely atmosphere.
It was. If you don't know what on earth we're talking about, you missed out, but you can catch up on it.
Where are we going next?
Well, that's a mystery. It's like a mystery tour.
Get the band back on the road, Michelle.
Yes, yes. And if you've not been to one of our live shows, you should. We go out to what I would call a working man's club. I know it's probably not very PC these days. The audience get involved, we get involved. We have a right good show. I really very much enjoy it. And it's nice to have you back in the studio, keeping me company.
It was great there, by the way, and I just want to thank everyone who turned up that day and made us so welcome.
Look at him.
No,
This is what I say about Ben. I call him the housewife's favourite, right? They all love you. They was all gutted I didn't play your little wink when was in Doncaster. But he's so well-mannered, isn't he? It's the kind of... You're the kind of man that everyone, you know, when you're saying to your daughter, oh, marry a nice man like that with good manners. That's what we all think about you, Ben. Anyway, I'm going off on a massive tangent, so I'll bring myself back on track, shall I? You know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us. It is very much about you at home as well. Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Lots of you have been getting in touch already. I want to talk to you about the inflation. It was expected to go down. It's gone up. What does that mean to you? And what's causing it? I think a lot of it now is greed from business owners. And I say that as a capitalist. Is capitalism broken? And speaking of capitalism, Rishi Sunak, he's released, it's not his tax return, it's like a summary from his accountant. It basically tells us he's earned a fortune and he's paid a fortune of that on tax. But so what? what has it got to do with us? This fella's money, yes, he's richer than us, but I should hope so. He's like, I want him to be exceptional. He's the Prime Minister. We'll get into whether or not all of that matters as well, and we'll talk about the Windsor framework. Luckily, we've got Ben Habib to explain it to everyone in case you're bored of it by now, what it means and what the goings-on in Parliament today, because it did pass by a significant majority, I have to say, as expected. Anyway, all eyes today are on Boris Johnson. Did you see any of that kind of privileged committee grilling? It was supposed to be up to about 5 hours. I think it ended up taking about 3 there or thereabouts in the end, so I bet he was relieved to get off early. He seemed to play it quite down the line, seemed to take it quite seriously. There was no main drama to report, and it all refers, doesn't it, to whether or not he knowingly misled Parliament throughout the Partygate era. Let's cut to the chase, Jo. I'll start with you. What did you make to it all?
Well, he was better behaved than I expected him to be. He was quite combative, and he started off, I think, by trying to make some jibes about the fact that Harriet Harman, who chaired the committee, had said previously, before she was appointed to chair the committee, that she thought he'd lied to Parliament, but he was relatively respectful. There were a couple of times when you could see he was getting rattled, and he clearly isn't comfortable without his audience of acolytes and the sort of the cheering and booing and, oh, he's just Boris. He sounded like a half-wit, to be perfectly honest. The idea that the Prime Minister of this country would walk, into a room or into a garden of Downing Street and see a group of people with bottles and trestle tables and not think, there seems to be a party going on, having spent every evening on the television telling the rest of us how to behave, it just beggars belief. He seemed to want to blame his advisers. He's the Prime Minister, or was the Prime Minister. You have to decide. That's the old adage. Advisers advise, ministers decide. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out there were parties going on, and surely you would have... I can't imagine, I was just saying to Ben before we came in the studio, I can't imagine Theresa May, John Major, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, or anybody else not saying, what on earth is going on?
Well, Keir Starmer didn't seem to have said what on earth is going on when he was having his little meeting, shindig, curry, beer. So it's not as clear. But anyway, in my mind, what I just heard you say then is essentially you think Boris is guilty as charged.
Well, I think, the public will have made their minds up. I think what is more significant, and I know we're moving on to Northern Ireland in a minute, and Dennis McShane just said it on Patrick's programme, that actually Boris Johnson and Liz Truss went through the lobby against the government, but there were only 27 other people with them. And I think, we're not going to know the results of this Privileges Committee until after the local elections in early May. So there'll be a lot of picking over analysis of body language and all of that sort of stuff in the papers tomorrow and shows like this. But I think most people have made up their minds. It's what the committee recommend should happen to him.
Yeah, I can assure you I will not be sitting there nitpicking over body language and all the rest of it. I can't think of anything more dull, quite frankly. Ben Habib, your thoughts on the going...
Well, I mean, just go back to basics. Why is him having a party important? And the reason it's important for me is that it was a law that he put in place that stripped the nation of its civil liberties, brought the economy to its knees and damaged the health and welfare of millions of people across the country. Loved ones had to die and so on their own. And so this was, at one level, you can kind of roll your eyes and say, well, it's Boris having a party, big deal. But actually, fundamentally, there was something very wrong with having a party when the nation was going through what it went through and the long-term consequences which we're now experiencing from lockdown. So I do take the matter seriously. And it turns not on whether he misled Parliament. He accepts he misled Parliament. It's whether he intentionally did so. Whether he knowingly did so. And I'm afraid I find him wanting there because he's hiding behind his advisers saying, well, I was told that it wasn't a party, all the rules were followed. Well, you're the Prime Minister.
Exactly.
And, if there's a cake there and there's lots of booze and people are laughing and joking, it's kind of a party. And I don't really buy the excuse that he had to morally boost his staff at this very difficult time. They were working 24/7. We were all going through a very difficult time, and the vast majority of us didn't break the rules in order to get feeling better. I think a number of us did, and I may have broken the rules, frankly, for all I know. The rules were complex and daft. But, you know, do we need to move on as a nation? I think we need to move on from Partygate. Has he lost his political capital? As Joe mentioned, I think he has. I don't think there's any coming back for Boris Johnson from today, and largely because he didn't carry more people through the no lobby on that vote. He was isolated, and I find it peculiar, we're going to get to the Windsor framework, but I find it peculiar that Boris Johnson, who constructed the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is essentially the same as the Windsor framework, should vote no. Having put the Northern Ireland Protocol in place, having had an 80-seat majority with which he could have unwound it, he didn't do it. He walked through the no lobby and very few people followed him. And that says to me that Boris Johnson as a political force is over. Does he care? Probably not. He's made over £5 million in the last 5 months.
Yeah.
Boris has landed on his feet.
And he looks like, I have to say, looks like a much more rested man.
Does.
When you see him today, he looks way less.
So would you and I, if we were
dishevelled.
making £5 million churning out speeches and things,
This
and not
is very
turning
true.
up to Parliament very often?
He hasn't even made the speeches. He's been paid up front for some of them. You know, exceptional earnings.
One of the things, and I can't help but just land this point, and I know it'll make some of my viewers groan, but when I watch all these goings on, I found them ridiculous today and I found them ridiculous at the time. I sit and I can't help but think, none of you lot in these offices, gardens, whatever, you were not frightened of COVID. So
No.
while we were being told at 5
Absolutely.
o'clock on the night, or whatever it was, these next slide, please, ridiculousness, we were being made to feel that we literally were going to kill each other, we were probably going to die ourselves, this was the worst thing to happen to this country in God knows how long, and therefore everyone had to stay in and all the rest of it. You lot, with the details closer to you than anyone else, you were not afraid. You were getting together, and I don't care really if you want to call it a party or a work do or a garage. I don't really care, quite honestly, about this. I think it's a bit of a distraction.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
But Ben's point about, Boris Johnson saying, it was my duty, to boost morale. Well, who needed morale boosting more than old people in care homes?
Well, all 68 million British citizens who were locked up.
And people working in the health service. It's just appalling. He's got no self-awareness and no understanding of all the things that we all agree on. That, yes, you're frightening the wits out of everybody else. You're imposing rules that you don't even understand, and you don't recognise a social gathering in a building because it's an old building with higgledy-piggledy rooms.
Well, what do you think the outcome of all of this is going to be then?
Well, I think it'll melt away into nothingness. I mean, there's a possibility that the committee will sanction him and suspend him for more than 10 days, in which case there could be a recall in Uxbridge, and he's sitting on a wafer-thin majority. I might stand against him if he decides to stand again.
Oh, you heard it here first.
Oh, breaking news.
Well, it'll be fun.
I want to
It'll be fun,
talk to you
wouldn't it?
about this whole reform thing as well before the end of the programme, because that really caught my interest. But do you reckon 10%, because 10% has to turn out, basically, to trigger that, do you reckon that amount of people would?
Well, I think he's honour bound to resign at that point as an MP. I think it's very hard.
Oh, I love. Do you think that he would?
Sorry, when you say honour,
Yeah, do you think he would?
I think it's unlikely, Ben.
So you think... So what do you reckon the outcome's going to be then? Do you reckon we're going to have this 10-day plus suspension and the situation we've just been discussing, or do you think it'll be...
I think we are. I think there's a high probability of a 10-day plus suspension.
I think he'll try and fight it.
I think he will.
I think if they say it was reckless... It might not, which is not as bad as deliberate, intentional. But if they say it was reckless, which I think is...
But he would then fight. He would then face a by-election. If he fights it, he'd have to
but
stand again.
Yes, I know, but I think he would fight the findings of the committee.
But he can't. I mean, they are the ultimate authority.
And then around and around we go. Dawn, one of my viewers says, this is a useless waste of time at taxpayers' expense.
Well, yes,
a
we are
whole
paying for
afternoon taken by an entire committee for personal nonsense reasons. You're basically saying it's people with a vendetta. You're calling it utterly disgusting. Andy says all these people telling you to get over it and move on are part of the problems we have in the UK.
He's right. And he's right.
I agree. Tim says, I do not care about any of this. There's far more important things to worry about, such as Russia and China. Richard says, yes, I do care about all of this. It shows the absolute arrogance of the entire number 10 machine under Boris Johnson. Graham calls it a pathetic, vindictive shower, a kangaroo court. Boris Johnson said that he didn't like people calling it a kangaroo court. At least that's what he's saying in public anyway. Doreen said the whole thing was hilarious. Jackie Weaver should have been chairing it. Other countries will be laughing at this and us. This is not the last you've seen of Boris. Ian, yeah, you make the same point that I do in terms of how come so many people were not so afraid of COVID when we were being terrified. Ron says a waste of time. Most working people and non-workers, for that matter, haven't got time for this nonsense. It has no impact on our lives at all. And Deb says, yawn, 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 yawn. What a smokescreen, she says, to distract us all from other issues. Perfect, interesting day today then, isn't it, for Rishi Sunak perhaps to land his tax affairs? I want your thoughts on that, by the way. Do you really think the Prime Minister of this country should have to show us his earnings and the tax that he paid? Is that any of our business? Does that affect your view of him as a Prime Minister or not? Give me your thoughts on that. And also, after the break, I want to get into the goings-on of the so-called Windsor framework, which passed by a huge amount, by the way, in Parliament today. Should it have done? What does it all mean? And how is it going to affect our lives going forward? We'll have that and more in 2.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, this is Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Ben Habib, the businessman and member of Reform Party, joins me, as does the political commentator Joe Phillips. Now, there's been much talk, hasn't there, about the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol, the Windsor framework and all the rest of it. Lots of focus on the vote that was going through this afternoon about whether or not, I mean, all of these things, we spend so much time pontificating. Will it go through? Won't it go through? Who will rebel? How many people will rebel? What will it mean for Rishi? What will it mean for Boris and all the rest of it? Anyway, the upshot of it is that the Windsor framework passed now today, and it passed by a huge margin. Let me get my facts right. 515 votes passed it to 29 against. 22 Tories voted against, 6 DUP and Andrew Bridgen as well. So that's the total. That's where we stand. First and foremost, right, Ben, because I worry that a lot of people, they don't really understand, A, what it is, and B, why it's so important. You are the guru on these kind of matters, so a quick summary for any viewers that are in that camp.
The reason it's so important, and it's not just a Northern Ireland issue, is because it attacks the foundations of the Constitution of the United Kingdom. When we voted to leave the EU, initially, the EU had no problem with the customs border on the island of Ireland. In fact, there's an EU paper saying it's perfectly capable to produce a smart border. The trade across that border, by the way, is less than 1% of the trade between the United Kingdom as a whole with the EU. It's a rounding error in trade. But they alighted on it as a mechanism to put a grappling hook into the side of the United Kingdom, which was the Northern Ireland Protocol. And through the protocol, they basically took political control of Northern Ireland. And what I mean by political control is that laws in Northern Ireland are made by an EU legislature and enforced by an EU court. And once they took control of those laws and they put the border down the Irish Sea, where there's much more trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, they were then able to economically try and capture North. So politically, they captured it with their laws. Economically, they tried to capture it by disrupting trade with Great Britain. And the idea behind that was to divert trade to the Republic and economically and politically, therefore, take control of Northern Ireland. Faced with that, the entire United Kingdom has two options. One, let Northern Ireland go, or two, align with the EU. Align our own regulatory environment with the EU so that we neuter as much as possible that border down the Irish Sea. So the Northern Ireland Protocol was an attack on the Constitution of the United Kingdom, and it was also a huge attack on Brexit. It was to prevent Brexit ever from happening, which is why I made the protocol the centrepiece of my fight for the last 3 years. And one of the reasons I've joined Reform is because I could see that I'm losing that fight. We are losing that fight. And today, Parliament, led by the Prime Minister, has put possibly a final nail in the coffin of Brexit and of the integrity of the United Kingdom, the union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And the reason I say they've done that is because they have set in stone today all the legislation that was in place already in Northern Ireland. There's never any way now to unpick it. Northern Ireland will be subject to all the laws, EU laws to which it is subject now. The mechanism to get rid of them is gone. They've introduced something called a Stormont break, which ostensibly gives Stormont, which is the assembly in Northern Ireland, the opportunity to pull a handbrake on any legislation, new legislation it doesn't like. But the brake doesn't work. I can go into details if you like. It doesn't work. And so what we've got is a false claim to green lanes for trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It's not a green lane. It's not frictionless. You have to get trusted trader status. You've got to fill in forms to comply with the green lane. And the EU has the right unilaterally to withdraw the green lane at its discretion. So we are going to live as a nation in perpetual fear of Northern Ireland being ripped away from the UK.
Joe, what's your thoughts on all of this?
I think it is a good thing that this has gone through. I mean, obviously, I stand on a completely different platform to Ben as far as Brexit is concerned, but I think this is probably the least worst option. The Stormont break will only work if Stormont begins to sit again, and I think the people of Northern Ireland really deserve better than this, and there really needs to be a bit of pragmatism now. And I think Rishi Sunak, actually, politically for him, this is important. He's got it through, and for the reasons we've already discussed, Boris Johnson didn't get his hordes of adoring masses following him through the no lobby. For Rishi Sunak, it's a success, and it's not just how it is seen domestically. Internationally, it's very important because it means that the temperature has been lowered. We've already seen that he's managed to create a better relationship with Europe, and particularly with President Macron and Ursula von der Leyen. He's a different kettle of fish.
But he's done that by giving up on the United Kingdom.
And that's exactly the point I was about to make, Dirk, because there'll be people at home, like, they'll be shouting at their screens now, saying, like, listen to what you're saying. You're almost saying that, you know, by all intents and purposes, and a part of the United Kingdom has, in many ways, now been annexed by a political union that the majority of people in this country voted to leave. And then you say, well, oh, it's really good, he's making mates with Macron and Ursula von der Leyen. And
yeah, because we need to have a better relationship with Europe. Whether we're in or out of Europe, we need to have a better relationship.
At the expense of the UK's sovereignty?
Well, it's not at the expense of the UK's sovereignty. Well, it isn't,
so.
Ben, and you know...
But would you tolerate London being subject to EU laws and adjudicated by an EU court? We wouldn't tolerate it. Would the French tolerate Normandy being subject to British law? No way. But this is an affront to our sovereignty and the integrity of our country.
Problem, Ben, without, you know, going back over, 2016 again and again, the real problem was that it was always going to be a problem with Northern Ireland.
No, it wasn't.
Yes,
I started what I said by explaining that Northern Ireland was not an issue. The EU issued a report in November 2017, declaring that the border could easily be managed on the island of Ireland using smart technology. And if they can... And here's the lie from the EU. They now claim that they can make the border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland more or less invisible. Well, why not do the same for a border on the island of Ireland, which separates two countries, two different currencies, two different tax rates, two different jurisdictions, and where trade is 1/5 of what it is between Great Britain and Northern Ireland? They choose to put the border down the Irish Sea because they want to defeat Brexit, they want to punish the United Kingdom, and in the pursuit of harmony with a belligerent neighbour, our government has given in. And it is the beginning of the end of Brexit, and it is political weakness that I have never, ever seen in my life. And we should all, as British citizens, be fighting this tooth and nail as a matter of principle. The UK is under attack, make no mistake of it, and our Parliament is complicit.
Well, that's very strong words there, and I'm going to bring in the audience, and I also want to come back to you on that. What do you make to that? Do you think, do you agree with Ben? There's a lot of strong feeling out there. Lee says, this is a sellout, Michelle. Europe now runs Northern Ireland. Ed says, the people of Northern Ireland were not consulted on the imposition of the Windsor framework, nor will they ever have the opportunity to change things at the polls. Talk about taxation without representation. The Unionists in Northern Ireland have been betrayed by this government. This is the end of the union, says David. I mean, there's such a strong feeling. Adrian says, I have nothing but contempt for Parliament now. They have essentially kicked and thrown Northern Ireland out of the UK. Let me ask you this. Are you in Northern Ireland? How do you feel today? I especially want to hear about your thoughts, your feelings, your views tonight on this issue. Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is how you can reach me. And I'll be bringing some more of your thoughts in before the end of the programme. When I come back from my break, I also want to talk to you about inflation, because all the great and the good of the world of economics essentially was saying inflation was coming down. It did not. It rose. Why? What is to blame? I blame business profiteering at this stage, and I say that as a capitalist. Am I wrong? Do you agree with me? Your thoughts, and I'll see you in 2. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen. Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Ben Habib, the businessman and member of the Reform Party, keeps me company, as does the political commentator Joe Phillips. I was just asking in the break to the panel whether or not we think there's Brexit fatigue going on now. People are just a little bit tired of it, bored of it, perhaps confused deliberately, some might suggest, by some of the details, and have zoned out. Many of my inbox are saying, you've got Boris fatigue now, leave him alone, pack it in, bashing him. You're saying it's a witch hunt against him and all the rest of it. You're asking, please, can we all change the record? I'm asking as well when it comes to the Windsor framework. Who of you out there are in Northern Ireland? Thomas says, I live in Northern Ireland, Michelle, and I am ashamed of what the British government has done to the proud people of my country. Please, can you read this out? I have. There you go, Thomas. Is there anyone else in Northern Ireland? Oh, here you go, Margaret. I am in and from Northern Ireland, and I feel like we've been thrown under the bus just to appease the EU. The Conservative and Unionist Party? I don't think so. That's Rita, actually, that says that. Keep your thoughts coming in. Lots of people agreeing with you, Ben.
They always do.
I know they do, but particularly on this issue. And there's a huge amount of strong sentiment here as well. One of you is saying, why don't you take a bus and come to Northern Ireland, drive around and talk to us all? You are offering to drive that bus. That's not a bad idea, actually.
Hey, that could be our next live show.
Our live on the road in Northern
Belfast.
Ireland.
Let's do it in Belfast.
Yeah, why not?
It's lovely city.
Yeah, keep your thoughts coming in. I mean, a lot of strong feeling here. Lots of you are saying that you feel that Northern Ireland has been sold out by this current government. One of you have just...
Today is a day of shame for our government. Today is a day of shame. they've taken the knee to supranational institutions to placate them at the expense of the rights of British citizens. And that's unacceptable.
But Ben, we've got to move on.
Yeah, but that
from the disaster.
But Joe,
yeah, but you see,
that's what the EU is counting on. That mentality.
But
we've got to move on and surrender.
You know, and I totally respect your views and everybody who voted for Brexit, but an awful lot of people voted.
You, Jo?
Yes, I do.
Are you sure?
Yes, I do. I do respect people's views. But I think a lot of people were duped. And it was absolutely clear that there wasn't a plan on so many things.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think, you know, whether it was Northern Ireland, whether it was trade, whether it's farming, whether it's freedom of musicians to move through Europe, whether it's horizon science things, there were so many things that were not, and I've said this before, you know, it wasn't an oven-ready deal because Boris Johnson hadn't even plucked the chicken. And I think, you know...
The chicken was off. I think it had salmonella.
The chicken was still running around, I think. But, you know, I think that people voted for all sorts of understandable reasons, but the details had not been worked through and there wasn't anything. And we now, you know, all these years on, 6 years on, I think there is a sense of Brexit fatigue. And also we've got to build better relations because we've now got, since Brexit, a war raging in Ukraine, which is, you know, in Europe. We've got...
Well, we've done a lot more for that war than the EU has.
Yeah.
And the EU arguably
China
aided and
Russia.
abetted the...
We've got a whole load of other problems that are, you know, worldwide, economic, environmental. And I think, you know, we need to stop using the same old Brexit arguments from then and move on.
I mean, this isn't a Brexit argument. I'm talking about an all-out constitutional attack on the United Kingdom by a foreign power. That's what's happening here. Do not misunderstand it. There may not be any guns being fired, but what they're using is political sway to get their way in the United Kingdom. 100 years ago, this would have resulted in a war. What they're trying to do 100 years ago would have resulted in a shooting war. But we've actually given up on 1.8 million British citizens without a single shot being fired. And our Parliament should hold their head in shame.
And some of those 1.8 million people are getting in touch. Carol says, I live in Northern Ireland, and what Ben is saying is 100% right. This is a very sad, and we the people have no say. Linda says, as a Brexit voter in Northern Ireland, why has the UK sold us out in this way? Our votes counted when it suited the UK government, but now they have betrayed us. John, I'm in Northern Ireland and I'm disgusted and fearful about what this will do for our province. What is our future now without a say in how we are governed? I mean, I can go on and on. David, I live in Northern Ireland, consider myself British, is a complete sellout. Graham, I'm a proud unionist from Northern Ireland. I am disgusted at the vote today, which once again throws Northern Ireland under the bus. I'm angry at people like Joe Phillips prepared to sacrifice us for their political objectives. And lastly, Billy, I live in Northern Ireland, and what the Conservatives have done is sell the unionist people out. We suffered the Troubles, we lost loved ones for our own British government to hand us over to Europe like this on a plate. It is a total disgrace. Wow, the sense of feeling and anger that I'm getting. Dare I ask, I think I might know the answer, but is there anyone in Northern Ireland watching, listening tonight that agrees with what's gone on, that supports the vote and the Windsor framework today? Does such a person exist? I'm always intrigued. If you do, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Speaking of moving on, I do want to squeeze another topic in before I finish the show, if I may, which is inflation, because there's been so many talks and rumblings about the inflation figures. We've been going on it now for months and months. Today it was anticipated that these figures, the CPI figures, would actually have declined, and it hasn't. It went the opposite way. It increased. The CPI is now at 10.4%. Just to give you a little sense of perspective, everyone, 2 years ago, it was apparently at 0.4%. Lots of these costings now, it's things like women's clothes, eating out, food, restaurant prices and all the rest of it. I've gotten to a point now, and I say this with regret as a capitalist because I do believe in capitalism. I think a lot of companies now are being out-and-out chancers. A lot of business owners, they are raising their prices way beyond the increases in their costs. I think it's shameful. I think it's wrong. I think it's dangerous because what you're going to see potentially is an interest rate rise, which when you've got the worry in the banking sector at the moment, that, in my humble opinion, I'm not an economist, but I would say that is the wrong move now. And I think this is wrong.
Well, I think you're probably right, Michelle. You know, I don't think any of the major supermarket chains have reported losses. In fact, many of them have had record-breaking profits. And what is really shocking, and most people watching will know this all too well, in food inflation is 18%.
I know.
Which is absolutely terrifying. I mean, that's the highest it's been for 40-something years. And the core rate of inflation, which takes out energy and food prices, is up to over 6%. So it's going in completely the wrong direction. You're absolutely right. Bank of England tomorrow will decide whether or not to raise interest rates. There is, despite everybody telling us there's nothing to worry about, there is great uncertainty and a bit of nervousness around the banking sector because of the collapses and saving of banks in America and Credit Suisse. But I think, you know, farmers and suppliers are not getting extra money. Supermarkets are whacking it on. Interestingly, it's lots of little things like, you know, we're all seeing an increase in our council tax from next month. It's your mobile phone contract. It's little deals like Tesco's announcing earlier this week that their rewards card is no longer 3 for 1, it's 2 for 1. Boots are doing the same. So all of those little things that help are being gradually taken away. And meanwhile, the profits are going up and there are a shortage of things on the shelves. We need to think a lot more carefully about food in this country. We need to think about where it comes from, what we can grow ourselves. We need to support farmers so that we are much more sustainable in producing our own crops. And we need to stop building over the countryside and, you know, absolutely make it so that it's easier for people to get affordable food.
Indeed. And also alongside me is Ben Habib, a businessman. So I'm interested in your thoughts on this topic. But also, you know the drill, it's about you at home as well. I want your thoughts on this topic. Are you a capitalist? What do you think when you look at things right now? Is this all fair and love, war, profit-making, or is it going a little bit too far? Your thoughts, Ben's thoughts on that topic as well. Coming up in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Before the break, we were getting into the topic of inflation, widely expected to have decreased today. It, in fact, increased. The CPI is now at 10.4%. Why? I'm personally blaming it on greedy business owners. And I say it reluctantly as a capitalist. I think there's a time and a place. And now people are bordering on irresponsible profit-taking. Your thoughts as a businessman, Ben?
Well, I'm reluctant to draw any conclusions from 1 month's figure. 10.4%, admittedly, is the opposite direction of, where we expected it to go. And as you said, Joe, the underlying, when you strip out food and other, seasonal, volatile consumer goods, you end up still with a core inflation that's higher than we want it to be. But I'm sure inflation is coming down this year. It'll burn itself out, partly because you measure it on a 12-month basis, and as we go into the future, our base is higher because inflation hit us, last year. So inflation will come down. I think the OBR is likely to be right in its projection of around 2.9% for the end of the year. I don't agree with you that it's profiteering. The areas that have gone up, restaurants, for example, hospitality sector, were hit very hard in lockdown. They've had big breakdown in the labour market that serves restaurants, and they've had to pay up to get staff. So I think they are charging it on. I do agree prices have gone up dramatically. What is remarkable is that restaurants are still quite full.
Well, I often say this, and then I'll get smacked for being out of touch, but wherever I go, I seem to see packed car parks, packed restaurants, packed this, packed that, and I do, packed shop. And I think to myself, where's
the money coming from? But the bigger thing that's really worrying me now is what's happening in the banking market. And over 13 years, financial institutions have been encouraged by governments to stop investing in shares, stop investing in property, stop investing in anything other than government bonds.
Indeed.
And so all these financial institutions have bought government bonds. So when interest rates go up, as we saw with SVB, as we saw with the pension funds, when Liz Truss tried to do something remotely conservative, they got into financial trouble. And so I think the Bank of England is between a rock and a hard place at the moment. And they've got to be very careful, because if they trigger off a domino effect across financial institutions...
That's what I'm worried about. And you say, it's a bit too quick to base my assumptions on, today's figures.
Well, I think...
I'm not basing my assumptions on today's figures. I'm basing my assumptions on the fact my eyes work. I wear glasses that work very well. I can see. I had a hash brown from a very well-known takeaway...
Golden Arch.
Yeah, it's called Golden Arches with the initial of my name. And I honestly swear my hash brown used to be 99p, and it was £1.69 on Sunday. What's that, 70% increase or something? Don't you tell me your costs have gone up 70%.
And it is those little things. It is pasta, it is flour, it is butter, milk, eggs, all of those things. It's not luxury items.
No, it's not luxury items. And that's why I think we've got to be slightly calmer about our reaction to inflation. The Bank of England raising interest rates controls principally the investment in assets. When you raise interest rates, you discourage investment in assets. You're not discouraging people from buying food. You still have to buy food.
Yes, but if that goes on...
You're punishing them.
But if they decide to put up interest rates tomorrow, which they may well do, that will go on to people's mortgages.
That will.
Which will then...
Which is the asset effect.
And then, they're going to think, gosh, we've got to cut back on our food.
And, it takes a few months for interest rate rises to show their impact. So what we're experiencing now in the markets with the banks, as a result of interest rate rises a few months ago, the Bank of England's got to be very, very careful.
Well, and they were criticised, weren't they, Ben, for not raising interest rates?
Yeah, I mean...
Sooner.
Well, lots of people are getting in touch with that, saying that you two are feeling excessive squeezes. We've been getting involved in the debate about the Northern Ireland Protocol, the Windsor framework, whatever you want to call it, the vote that passed. Lots of people in Northern Ireland angry. I was asking, is there anyone that's in Northern Ireland that has a different view? I found one. I think you say this. Is it Peter, your name? You say, I live here in the north of Ireland and I'm an Irish nationalist, but I'm noticing that you're only reading out emails that agree with people classing us as British. Irish nationalists are in a majority, you say, and you also fail to mention that the British carved up our country 100 years ago. I don't ever just read out emails that I agree with. Everybody's welcome on this show. All views are welcome, as long as we respectfully disagree. On that note, thank you very much, Joe and Ben, for your opinions. Very strong views out there. And maybe you're right, you know, maybe one of these days we do have to take ourselves out and come and see you all in Northern Ireland and have this debate out in the flesh. That is all I've got time for. Something tells me this topic is not finished. You've got Nigel Farage up next, Jacob Rees-Mogg after him. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for now, though, for your company, and I will see you tomorrow night.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got